Hi, welcome to a tutorial video on how to kind of begin the process of building a clay head on top of a small cardboard and newspaper armature. So the first thing we want to do is basically create a wall about a 1/4 inch thick around our entire armature. So I start by taking pieces of clay that I refer to as like cookies and press them flat to the point where they're about a 1/4 of an inch thick, and I start at the base and I wrap them around the cardboard cylinder so that they're flush with the base, and then I'll grab another one, pinch it to the same thickness, and I tend to overlap each piece so that I can work the clay together and that it's consistently thick, and I work my way up. And then I'll make a thinner, smaller one if I don't need a large piece. I try to work with small pieces, overlapping them just a little bit on their edges and working the clay together so I'm not trapping air and keeping the wall nice and consistent. Here we go, we got the neck cylinder kind of covered pretty well. Now I'm going to cover the newspaper ball on top. So I do that by creating kind of a round ball of clay, pressing it into a round cookie. This is like the biggest cookie that I'll be working with, and I will lay that right on top and balance it there so it doesn't fall in any one direction. And then I start connecting the bottom of that top piece to the top of the overlapping slightly. And if I make my pieces a little too big, I refer to these as like Milano cookies because they have that kind of shape. And I'll kind of work symmetrically, so I'll do another one on this side so it's balanced and it doesn't fall in any one direction. A little too much here. There we go. Work the clay in. Keep it up against the newspaper ball so it maintains that spherical shape. And now I'm going to go opposite sides, 2 pieces. You notice I keep my clay really handy here and I don't allow it to dry out. So I'll keep a spray bottle nearby in case this takes me a little while, so I can keep that clay nice and moist, because I don't want to have to do any scoring and slipping. I want my clay to be nice and wet. And I just really work it together. There we go. 4 pieces on there now. And now I have these gaps, right, where I see newspaper through, these little openings. At this point, I usually just kind of rotate it and look at it, stare at it, and one side usually speaks to me as the front. And I don't know what, something about just the general proportion of that basic shape. And when I find that front, I leave that opening and I start to just fill the others, making pieces that are just custom sizes that just slightly overlap the edges, and I fill those areas in. This is a real skinny one here on that side. Compress. There's my front, so this is, I just have to do this one last side, and then I'll talk about this front here. There we go. There, so now the whole armature is covered except that slot in the front. So what I usually do when I have that is I establish a forehead, because you know, sitting the eye level a little bit too high is pretty common when doing kind of a portrait of a human head. So I usually fill that in, so that kind of determines, okay, I have a forehead, so I know my eye level is going to be below that. So now the next thing I'm going to do is just kind of cover the rest of that newspaper with just one piece that just fits that area perfectly. That'll be where my nose, be like the center of my face, basically right there. All right, now my hole. Now, just to make sure I don't forget that that's the center, I might want to make a little line, little reference line with a fettling knife or a wood tool, so that I remember that's my front, these are the sides. Now after I do, the next thing I'm going to do is to kind of create the basic shape of this head, is add a jaw and chin line, right? Because right now we just have a sphere and a cylinder, and a head isn't just a sphere and a cylinder. It has a jaw that kind of comes out, a form that kind of projects off of almost the top of the cylinder, more so than it kind of comes off of the spherical part of the head. So I'm going to cut a hole down here, exposing the cardboard and sometimes a little bit of newspaper, like that. Then on top of that, I'm going to make a pinch pot, right? Just roll a ball of clay, make a simple pinch pot that's the same thickness as the walls, make it a little bit wider at the top than your opening, and I'm going to stick that over and work that clay in at the edges of that pinch pot. Now, if you see that in profile, right, it has much more of a head-like shape, right, and it's hollow through there, right? So it's not, because that would have been too much solid clay to add. It would have built up the thickness to such an extent that that we'd probably have a potential blowout. So we don't want to add too much thickness. We want to keep this wall as consistently 1/4 of an inch as possible. So the last thing we do to kind of establish the basic head shape is establish our eye level. And we talked about placing our forehead, right? So we know we have forehead. And now, when we know the bottom of the chin and the top of the head, eye level is more or less halfway, right, between the bottom of the chin and the top of the head. So if we make a line that's halfway, right, that's telling us where our eyes should be placed. So if we have our center line here, and we have our eye line there, if I take my thumbs and place them on either side of my center line at eye level and push in a little bit, just make depressions. We make kind of almost the eye sockets, right, or where the eyes will fall inside those recessed areas. And if you expand your head too far out when you push in, just push back in kind of at the sides of the eye sockets, and that'll be where the temples fall. It looks a little alienish, a little skeletal at this stage, but that's kind of the basic structure. And then we're going to start to kind of, in the next step, we're going to start adding more clay, more musculature, more meat to the surface of this head and build it up. And it's going to become more and more human and more representative of the person that we're going to be doing our portrait of. Thanks.